This information you are about to hear and perhaps view, these are not necessarily the thoughts or the ideas of Gary C.Clement or the Gary Clement Radio Show podcast. We are in no way, shape, or form affiliated with the parties this story is about or was interviewed for. Parts of this content may not be owned by or the property of the Gary Clement Radio Show podcast, G2 Network Media, or any other company we are affiliated with, and this information is strictly the opinion of those being interviewed. This content is for information purposes only, and although we may make reference to various news stories, we share our own independent beliefs about the content and provide our own opinions. Please enjoy the information. Haard News, hosted by Gary C. Clement. Today's news is made up of so many different issues, and it's hard to keep up. But we all know it's important to keep law enforcement in the community and society, as many in America have a problem doing the right thing. Growing up, my mother always said it's easy to do right, but so many people choose wrong, and once you get in trouble, it's very hard to get out of it. Haard News will tackle all issues that break the barriers of justice for all, freedom for all, and simply a good and strong meaning of democracy for all. The show covers politics, crime, gun violence in our communities, and will introduce guests who have a personal stake in these issues. So without further ado, please enjoy this week of Haard News, hosted by Gary C. Clement. Hi, my name is Gary C. Clement, and welcome to Haard News. Today's topics for discussion are: number 1, the gun violence in Baltimore, the block party shooting. Number 2, the church's role in addressing the violence in our communities in active programs for the church. Number 3, the role of local government in impoverished and vulnerable communities. What are they really doing? Our guest today for this episode is Pastor Avery Thurman, a fireman and associate pastor of the Created for So Much More Worship Center, a non-denominational church in Baltimore, Maryland. He joins us today to discuss the latest violence in that area and how it's affecting the lives of our young people and the community of Baltimore. Also on this call are Evangelist Catherine Talley of South Boston, Virginia, Reverend Albert S. Williams of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and my co-host, Mr. Ron Dove of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So first of all, Pastor Thurman, please tell us a little bit about your background in being an associate pastor in Baltimore, Maryland, as well as being a firefighter, please.
Okay, thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity. My name's Avery Thurman. I'm one of the associate pastors at Created for So Much More Worship Center, where our pastor is Apostle Willie Saunders Jr. I'm born and raised in South Baltimore, Cherry Hill, which is the neighboring community to Brooklyn. Lived out there for most of my life until I turned 24. But even after that age, when I moved out and brought her home, most of my family and my place of worship still resides in Cherry Hill. I am also a Baltimore City firefighter with 20 years of experience this year, and I'm stationed in the community in which I grew up in. So I never became disattached from where I was born and raised.
I see. Okay. Now, this recent situation with this block party shooting or whatnot, what can you tell us about that? Were you one of the respondents to that particular situation?
Actually, on this day, I was actually off that day, but we've had a lot of discussion about the incident. As you can imagine, due to its gravity, it's gotten national and maybe even international attention. So I wasn't at work that day to respond to the call, but in essence, the gravity of the situation has put everyone on alert and pretty much coming up with ideas on how to respond, being that something like this has happened.
I see. Now, how far exactly was the, this situation that happened? How far was that? Is that from the church you actually are associate minister of?
Man, maybe less than 10 miles.
Okay.
It's literally the neighboring community, literally.
Yes, sir. Okay. And from my understanding, in my research, it says, it's the location was the Brooklyn Homes neighborhood. There were a few hundred people or whatnot in the audience, I guess, for this particular event. And the event was entitled the Brooklyn Day Celebration, I believe. Have you ever attended that event before?
I haven't personally attended the event, but I'm aware of it. It's something that they do annually. The community does annually. They've been doing it for quite a while. It's just nothing like this has ever happened at the event.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. And Evangelist Talley, you've also lived in that area for a long time as well. What can you remember about this particular place? I guess you could say.
Well, I've never lived in the Brooklyn area. I worship at the church where Pastor Avery is associated with, and I was there probably for about 30 years. But as Pastor Avery said, I lived in Baltimore City for about almost 40 years. Actually, I'm from Baltimore to Randallstown, back to Baltimore, and we had block parties at the end of the school year, to congratulate the kids and other accolades and other things that were positive things that were going on, and never had a problem. Never had any violence or anything. Was always received. The mayor of the city, as a matter of fact, the senator Welcome was one of my neighbors, and so we had the politicians there, and the kids, danced, and we gave them hot dogs and whatever, and never had a problem. Never. And this is just it's just absolutely horrible to hear that something like this has occurred, like less than 10 miles from my home church. It's very sad.
Wow. Yeah, this is very, very interesting. Baltimore actually has a bad reputation for gang violence as well as, a lot of gun violence, period. What have they done? What has the city done, would you say, to try to rectify some of this?
Well, I'm going to say this, and I think Pastor Avery will be able to give you more insight. My nephew was the chief of narcotics in there for about 15 years, and he just got he retired maybe about 3 years ago, and it was just so overwhelming that, of course, he had to just leave because he just couldn't handle, every night, every day, every night it was a killing and gang shootings and whatever, but it hasn't been that way all the time. We lived in Baltimore, as I said. We never experienced the violence that they're experiencing. I left Baltimore about 20 years ago, and this is new. I mean, relatively new, like less than 20 years old. And a lot of what seems to be happening, a lot of the young people that were involved were sent away to different prisons or whatever. They've come out and look like they've come out of jail instead of being rehabilitated. They seem like they've come out with a vengeance, like, I'm going to get you now because I'm out, I'm on the streets. And that's the story that I got from my relative that was, in charge of narcotics. And it's just, blossoming and drugs and the ghost guns and all this stuff. It's just, very, very sad, very sad.
I see. Okay. Now, Pastor Avery, go ahead. I'm sorry. You can speak.
Yeah, this is Ron. Somehow, these things are encouraged because it's so systematic across the country in almost every locale. I'm just wondering.
I think Pastor Avery would be a better person to answer that, since, as I said, when I left Baltimore, and Baltimore was a good place to live. I raised my two sons there. And I went to school there, and I got a couple of masters and whatever. So I enjoyed living in Baltimore. Would have probably still been there if he hadn't come down to take care of my relatives, which I thank God, because I was part of the master's plan. But Pastor Avery would be much better to answer that than me, because I never witnessed any violence that he's now witnessing.
Yeah, I definitely like to answer that. I think I can agree with that to a certain extent. I think we have to look at the historical context of our black neighborhoods and our so-called ghettos. I think Cherry Hill is probably the perfect place to highlight in order to get to the mindset of even why there are residents in Cherry Hill. If you Google Cherry Hill and do a historical study on Cherry Hill is the largest centralized area of subsidized housing north of the Mississippi. The origins of Cherry Hill, they created Cherry Hill for two reasons. One, African Americans was coming out of World War II, and it was just about to start the Civil Rights Movement, and we were looking for a place where we can start to come up. We were no longer tolerating being shut out and the opportunities closed in our face. So to give us a concession and to keep us out of the white neighborhoods, and everything I'm saying is historical truth, to keep us out of white neighborhoods, Cherry Hill was picked to be a location where blacks can come who are serving out of the military and other individuals, that they can have a centralized location. Now, Cherry Hill was chosen for one reason. The one reason Cherry Hill was chosen, because it was deemed at the time the most undesirable piece of land in Baltimore City, only second to Turner Station. And the reason why it was the most undesirable location is because it was a bunch of industries and plants there, and they thought the ground was toxic.
Wow.
So they built out. This is do a historical look on it. There are books on it, and so they built a community specifically for black people in this place we call Cherry Hill. And so when we talk about what I would say is the projection that they had when you put up people in a place like that with lack of resources, lack of opportunity, a lack of hope. It's hard for me to believe that this wasn't foresight of the things we're seeing today. And then I'll also say the individuals in power are good at psychology. They understand conditions that you put humans in, what will be produced in those conditions. And historically speaking, we have treated crime as if it was a result of people being evil and malicious and just horrible individuals. When the truth is, especially in neighborhoods where there's poverty, crime has always been an economical source. Because when you don't have funds and you don't have resources, you must come up with some. And historically speaking, the government did put, and we know this historically, they did put drugs in our community because they understood that drugs was an economic come up for horizontal and vertical mobility. And we would not deny that opportunity. And then they can also capitalize by then saying they're fighting against this evil element by also supporting the element in which they call evil. So do I think that the government and the foresight of individuals who used to be in government has something to do with today? No question. But I also think as a people, in a place where we are today with the information we have today, our lack of planning and counteracting the traps that was laid for us, we have to take some responsibility for that as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Right. And it's very interesting because I'm watching your mayor, Brandon Scott. He's a 39-year-old college graduate of a liberal arts college. This guy is on top of things. He's very good, in my opinion. What do you all feel as if, to live in Baltimore and be a product of that area, how do you feel about the job that he's doing?
I think Brandon Scott, he's not, I can't blame him. I can't say he's bad. I think some of the problems he's facing were so far before him and before his time as becoming mayor that a lot of the individuals who aren't supportive of him are taking the opportunity to blame him for things that was always out of his control and that were out of control before he came into office. But I think he has a lot of good policies, but I also think sometimes there is no replacement for experience. And Brandon Scott, who was an incredible councilman, as a matter of fact, when I lived in East Baltimore, he was my councilman. And he made sure that he went to every graduation in his district. He's a very people-centered person. But at the same time, I think sometimes his inexperience shows, and he doesn't have a team around him to compensate for his lack of experience. And I think the reason why it's hard for him to build a team around him is because he doesn't have a lot of supporters, as far as in the actual city council, because a lot of these guys in city council, they've been in there for some time now. And even though he's the mayor, he is still pretty much one of the new kids on the block.
I see. Wonderful. I see. I see what you're saying. Right. Okay. Now, to get back to the actual community and the church and whatnot, what kind of programs in the church do you all have to kind of combat some of this stuff or to answer to some of these negative things that are happening in the community?
At my church personally?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so about 3 years ago, just before the pandemic started, the church that I attend started an initiative called Creative Cares. And what we did was we identified that at the time, just before the COVID, well, let me tell you about the Chariot community. The Chariot community is deemed and labeled as a food desert. And what that term means is it has no grocery store, not only within the community, but not in the area of the community. And
Yes,
so
sir.
people do their grocery shopping at corner stores and a Dollar General and things like that. So they don't, it's called a food desert. And so what we did was we were really blessed to get in contact with this one brother who came to us and provided us an opportunity to provide ready-made meals for the community. And we were able to do that for almost 2 years. We provided some days up to 500 meals a day, Monday through Friday, ready-made meals. And what that did was it did something that we really didn't expect. And what it did was it made us relatable to the community. And I think sometimes the church don't realize how unrelatable we are, even though we're located in a community. And the reason why we're unrelatable sometimes is because in order to be relatable, you have to have some type of common ground, right?
Yes, sir.
Paul made this statement. He said, I became all things to all men, that I may win some for Christ. So there's a level of commonness that you have to have with the individual that you want to win. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of churches haven't found somewhere to meet on a common ground with their community, so the community can see the church as a resource and not just as a place that want to use them as a resource.
I see. Right. Okay. And Reverend Williams is also here. We would like to hear from him because he's also a former pastor as well as a fireman. Reverend Williams, do you have anything to say?
Oh, I like to. I'm listening, and it's very much like they were saying. It's in the system itself, the way things have been done. I guess a good word would be systematic, and the only way to handle that, I like the pastor says, getting involved with programs, getting involved with, the younger people, and particular the black males. Our black males are really suffering from lack of role models, fathers in the home, and basically setting the principles of, a quality life. Starting at an early age, train up a child in the way that he should go. The black family, and I related back to the time that I integrated. I was the first black firefighter for the town of Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in 1968. Of course, I carried some experiences in there from my time in the military, very structured. During the time of the Berlin crisis and down in Cuba, Castro was winding his tactics up, and Castro challenged the system, and it brought a lot of things out. We, as a race, I deeply believe this, we have gotten away from our spiritual and moral conduct and belief in God. We don't fear the things of God like we did when we were brought up. For instance, a very simple illustration is when it started thundering and lightning, our parents made us sit down and get quiet because God was doing his work. And that brought your attention to the spiritual part of life. Of course, we had to attend church. That was no option.
Yes, sir.
And from these backgrounds, we started the civil rights movement in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, in February of 1962. Because as young black males, the students from Greensboro, A&T College, there in Greensboro, North Carolina, we were stimulated by their act at the Woolworth store to do something in a college town, the University of North Carolina. So we did, and we were arrested, and we were put under bail. I think it was something like $20 or less, but we didn't have any money to come up with no bail. So some group of people, Floyd McKissick out of Durham, North Carolina, the late Floyd McKissick, they got together with some of our community leaders, and they bailed us out of jail. That was a big thing for Chapel Hill with the University of North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I don't mean to cut you off, Reverend Williams, but I kind of want to get through this a little bit, okay? So, again, I need to go back to Pastor Thurman here for a second. Another thing that I see across the country that's happening too is that we have a lot of abandoned buildings, dissipated housing, lack of jobs, gangs, guns, all these different issues, accompanied by a lack of education. As a pastor in the community, what is the church doing to address some of these issues?
I think the church, the church may have greater ambitions than they have actual resources. And I don't think enough churches are equipped to handle the real life situations that the citizens in the community that they may be located in are actually facing. And I think, unfortunately, the church has, in some places, become satisfied with simply giving faith and stopping there. And I think if we really read the word, the one thing that Jesus was always intentional about doing when he was talking about the intangible was to make sure he gave the tangible first.
Yes, sir.
And I don't think enough churches are invested or have planned on how to give something tangible to the people, and they have just completely focused on giving the intangible faith. And I don't think, unfortunately, there's not a lot of churches that are trained or equipped to handle what we're facing today, and they almost try to ignore it, because if you don't ignore it and you highlight it, then you also highlight how you are unprepared to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah. Can I add something to that also?
Go ahead, Ron.
One of the things that I'm seeing is, the church has been so instrumental in our fight for freedom and justice, and where we have the meetings for our community and so forth. But right now, it seems to me like the church is going through a crisis as far as the respect, the membership. One of the things that I have noticed right here in my own city in Philadelphia, there was a church that was once a Jewish synagogue, and then it was bought out by a non-denominational church, and that church was flourishing. And then I think when the pastor passed later on, the Muslim Islamic community bought that building. So it went through three different religions: Judaism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But what I'm hearing when I'm speaking, especially to youth, some think that they feel like the church now is not really doing what relevant to what young people are thinking. And I'm noticing in this city there's been a great movement toward the Islamic community. And I've even talked to some brothers who they call themselves Hebrew Israelites, who say that they don't feel that the church is really expanding on, on the word or whatever. But it seems to me like there's a lot of people falling away from the church. And I think as good as some of the great ministers that we have, especially young guys who have good ideas, I think some of them are struggling. We do have the mega churches, but the churches that seem to thrive, if they offer something for the youth, that's a big plus. But it seems to me like more and more people are seeming to ease away from the church. Have y'all noticed any of that? Have you noticed that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Well, I can say from the early days of Cherry Hill, let's say we'll go back maybe 35, 40 years, in our church, and Pastor Avery has so very, very well given you all the geographic, all of the type of information and where he thought the governmental played a part in all that. But back in that, back 25, 30 years ago, we have always had a great outreach program from our church in Cherry Hill. We've always had we've had new members once they came. We've always we canvassed the neighborhood and those types of things. And as Pastor Avery said, now they are doing the food, which is such a vital program. But we would go into the homes on Saturday mornings and knock on their doors, and we would witness to the neighbors, and we would bring them in, and we would have new member classes. They didn't come in and sit idly. We had them to go through a series of weeks for new member classes, and we involved their family members, and we had quite a few children, youngsters that came to our church by themselves, and eventually some of the parents followed them. So the thing now is, and I think someone mentioned that a great falling away of the church. Well, the Word of God say in the last days there would be a great falling away. And sometimes it's not, people aren't falling away, they're not actually leaving the building. But sometimes people, their spiritual lives, and they're not where they were at one point in the Lord. So that's the falling away as well. So, but I can say, and I know for a fact that Cherry Hill, our church in Cherry Hill, I don't know of any other churches in Baltimore City that has done as much for the children and outreach as Creative for So Much More has done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now, Pastor Thurman, if you could tell me, what's the breakup of your church? Meaning, when it comes to, young people, how many young people actually attend there? How many middle-aged, people are members there, as well as how many older people do you have in your congregation?
So young people probably make up the majority of and when I say young people, I would say 20, 25 and down. Would that be a good number to stop at for young people? Mm-hmm. They probably make up the majority of our church. And then it's about the ranging between 25 and 45 would be about equal to the ages of 45 and up. So the majority of our church is actually young people. And when we have youth Sundays and they run the program, that's when it really shows. I mean, because our church is really big, and so we can be spread out and it looks like it's a few people. But when they all are centralized in one location, you really can see how many young people we have. So young people make up at least probably half of our population.
I see. Okay.
And Pastor Avery, we have to also say that the reason we don't have a lot of elderly members is because they've gone on to be with the Lord. We had,
absolutely.
When I left, we had the motherboard. We had so many mothers, but as I understand, maybe we have one or two that are left, and they've gone on to be with the Lord. So it wasn't that we didn't have the mothers, the elderly citizens. They were there, but
no doubt.
As the church continued to grow, they've gone on to be with the Lord. So they left some mighty.
And a few of them went. A few of the ministers, at least 3 of them went and started their own church as well.
Right.
So we had some that leave because they just moved on and take higher responsibilities in the kingdom. But you're absolutely correct.
I see. Okay. Now, going through some statistical stuff that I was able to actually do some research on earlier, I'm seeing that this particular area, Brooklyn Homes neighborhood, actually is considered a public housing area, and the annual household income is about $59,766 a year, where the median income is $43,007 a year. And but it doesn't, I guess you could say compute, perfectly, because then I look at moneygeek.com and it says that Baltimore is out of the 15 most dangerous cities in the country. Baltimore is number 3. And that's, I know this got to make you all, really think about, what is going on in Baltimore that's so much worse than the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I think the numbers for Brooklyn is a little bit deceiving, and the reason why I say, as far as the annual income, you said 59,000.
Yes, sir.
Is the annual income?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I can tell you that definitely isn't the case. But the problem with Brooklyn is Brooklyn actually, where Brooklyn is located, half of Brooklyn is the city, and the other begins Anne Arundel County.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Brooklyn is one area, but once half of that area or a little bit more is Anne Arundel County, where they're probably using those numbers because those homes are homeowners and things like that, and they're combining them with the inner city part of Brooklyn. Because it's Cherry Hill, then it's Brooklyn, then Anne Arundel County starts, which is still remains Brooklyn, and then it becomes Brooklyn Park, and then Ritchie Highway. And so I think they're including the county portion of the residents when they're talking about those numbers, because I can assure you they wouldn't even qualify to be in public housing making $59,000 a year.
Right. Right. Yes, sir. Right. Wow. I hear you. That's interesting. Okay. So when it comes to, like you said, the difference in these numbers or whatnot, I guess you could say, like I said, there's a whole lot more suffering going on that they really want to put out there, or really put in, like you said, put into the public eye and make it look like everything is okay when it actually is not.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I also think there's a subculture in our community through the music that young people today listen to, and are impressed by and are trying to emulate. I think, especially for African American people, if we take it all the way back to slavery, music has been an intricate part of who we are as Black people. And if you ever want to know the culture that we were following, you can look at the music we were listening to at the time.
Yes,
right?
Sir. Yes, sir.
When we were going through the struggle of slavery and civil rights, gospel music was literally the heartbeat of who we was as people. You didn't have to be Christian to respect gospel music.
Yes, sir.
You had people that wasn't Christian singing hymns because it echoed where we were as a people. And so when you look at the soundtrack that we live by through the ages in which we existed, you can tell by the soundtrack the mentality of our people. And the soundtrack that our people are living by today is a soundtrack of death, of materialisticness, of over-sexuality. And unless we find a way to counteract that culture, there is no change that can be made.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Okay. Reverend Williams would like to say something?
I'm liking. I was agreeing with what the gentleman was saying.
Yes, sir.
It's real schooling to hear somebody in a different location in the country talk about these problems.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's really enlightening, encouraging.
Right. I hear you. Okay. So, Pastor Thurman, when it comes to, being a fireman, to try to separate that from being a pastor of a church, I know that a lot of this actually has to alarm you in various ways. What are you able to do as a fireman to, I guess you could say, bring light to some of these situations or whatnot in regards to, maybe say going to the neighborhood or going to the schools or whatnot, being able to, I don't know. What do you all do as a fire department to try to be a part of this in a positive light?
Well, one thing I can say is we're very active in the schools, even elementary age schools, because, the good thing about being a fireman is everyone loves firemen. The kids speak to us, parents wave to us, and it's because of that reputation, that love that the community has, and the reputation we have, that we're accepted in the community where police officers may not be. So it gives us a little leverage that we can use to get messages across. But one parallel that I will say that I try to use both in my professional and in my spiritual life is one of the main components of being a firefighter isn't just the physical suppression of fire. The actual goal in being a firefighter is prevention through education, right?
Yes.
So if I can tell you your dangers and make you aware of the things that cause a fire, you can put me out of business.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Right?
Yes,
and to put that in the spiritual way, the Bible says that we're not ignorant of the devil's devices.
That's right.
And the parallel that I'll make is we are ignorant of the devil's devices. We don't always see all the things that are around us that are demonic and are evil that are being used against us, like the music, like some of the things that is available for us to watch and social media. We don't see them as threatening, and so because we don't see them as threatening, we allow ourselves to be entertained by it. Mm-hmm. And so what I would say is one thing I try to do just in conversation with other people is I try to point out threats. I try to be a part of prevention. I try to say, yeah, that sounds good, but you think about the mood that put you in. I told this guy this one time because the Lord did this for me. I grew up in Cherry Hill. My parents, love music. I grew up. Block parties growing up was just a part of living in Cherry Hill. Like Sister Tally was saying, that's nothing unusual. So music is a huge part of my life. And when I became a believer, the Lord had me do something that was extremely challenging for me. I mean, I kept saying, this ain't God. This ain't God. He was, and what the Lord had me do was he had me get rid of all my secular music. I threw away all my rap music, all my secular music, and I did not listen when I can control the environment. I did not listen to secular music for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And what I realized when I didn't have that music was that music primed me to respond to things and the way in which the music suggests. In other words, I could be driving down the street and I'm listening to Jay-Z. When someone cuts me off, my response is totally different when I'm listening to Jay-Z versus when I'm listening to Marvin Sapp.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You get what I'm saying? And if a young lady is walking down the street, she may walk by and I don't even notice her when I'm listening to Marvin Sapp. But when I'm listening to Jay-Z and it's talking about look at buns and things like that, I'm noticing everything walking down the street.
Yes, sir.
And so what I try to explain to people and show people is that the things that we think is harmless aren't as harmless as we think they are.
Right. Yes, sir.
All right.
Because the battlefield is the mind, right?
Yes, sir.
And,
Right.
And here's a little something about a battlefield. Isn't it ironic that countries that may be the size of America or greater than the size of America, the battlefield in which they fight on may be just a tenth of the size of the countries in which are fighting. Right. I say that to say this: the battlefield is small, but you lose your whole country on the battlefield.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
All right.
And so if we don't teach people about the understanding the opponent that they are facing and the crafty ways the opponent make themselves not look threatening so they can start winning on the battlefield, we can continue to lose whole individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. A few years ago, Baltimore was in the news, national as well as international, for police brutality and the murder of Freddie Gray. Please talk a little bit about that.
I would describe Freddie Gray incident as the straw that broke the camel's back. Mm-hmm. The incident in itself, to be honest with you, wasn't anything that was abnormal as the police. When I was growing up in Cherry Hill, I seen the police beat up so many people. I didn't think it was illegal. and when my friends would get beat up by the police, we would blame the person who got beat up. You should have ran. You should have got away. And so I didn't even know that it was a such thing as police brutality. Mm-hmm. That's how normal it is, to see police mistreat individuals in a city. And so what Freddie Gray thing did was it turned the tables, because for the first time the police was under the spotlight, but they didn't like the spotlight. So what police did, which really is a big impetus for where we are today, what the police did was, for the most part, a lot of them decided they're not going to put effort into what they called to do. Mm-hmm. The response times are down. The will to solve things are down, because in their mind they were going to prove that you need us more than we need you.
Mm.
Mm.
And so the flip side of the coin with the Freddie Gray was the police actually stopped policing.
Mm. Yes, sir.
Mhm.
And so even down, if you listen to the reports on this incident where the 30 people got shot, one of the things you'll continue to hear say is, what took the police so long to respond?
Mm. Yes, sir.
Mhm.
You'll literally hear them say the response time for this incident where you have all these people calling with 30 people shot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they said was, what took the police so long to respond? Because they already been doing this ever since the Freddie Gray incident.
Wow.
Mm.
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 Very, very interesting. Wow. Mm. Okay. And for whatever reason, like you say again, this is like not just in, that city, but as Ron said, all of this violence like this is spreading throughout the entire country. How do you all feel about that?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I do honestly believe, it's, I once had a conversation with this well-to-do, I would call him a well-to-do white guy, right? And for the first time, I realized that being born and raised in Cherry Hill and in a city in general was like being raised in the wild, and he was raised in a zoo, right? And I'm gonna tell you how I came to this realization. He was talking about how his parents set him up for this, and how his parents set him up for that, and how they go to the North Banks, and how since he was 5, they were saving up for a down payment for a house. And it hit me. He lived in an environment where his number one goal was not survival.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Our people are living in an environment where the number one goal is survival. Now, here's why I go back to that analogy with the zoo and wildlife. If you see a monkey in the cage and he's acting up, jumping up and down on bars, you're going to say, he misbehaving. He ain't got no reason to be acting like that.
Mm-hmm.
He hitting other monkeys upside the head. What is he doing? Zookeeper, get this guy under control because he has resources. His environment doesn't dictate he should behave like that. If you see that same monkey fighting another monkey in the wilderness, you know what you're going to say? That's just nature.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And so, because as Black people, we have been fighting to survive so much, and we have taken all of these drastic things to survive, whether it's drug use or drug abuse or drug selling, the white man now, and I don't mean to get racial, I'm being honest, the politicians now are saying that's their nature.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And because that's their nature, we need to, we don't need to invest in them. We don't need to give them counseling, mental health help. We need to be harder on on the concentration of our laws on them.
Mm.
We need to be harsher on them because they're wild animals that only understand punishment and pain.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Now, when our counterparts suffer the exact same thing, they don't call them junkies. They say they got a disease.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yes, sir.
They say they need rehab. They say they need mental health counseling. They say they need a support system.
Mm-hmm.
And so what has happened in the media is they have done a great job of making the same kind of people in one state, in one situation, look like wild animals, while the other one look domesticated and should give them some grace and some help because they don't naturally act like this. Something got to be wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm. Very
Wow.
interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is very, very interesting. Yes, sir. Okay. So another thing, my wife and I, we actually have been brainstorming one day, and we came up with a different podcast, which is called "Let's Pray for the Culture." And then my wife also came up with "What Happened to the Village," and the very thing that you're talking about kind of sort of plays into what we kind of sort of like I said, came up with or not. Let's pray for the culture. What would be your prayer for the culture right now, Reverend Pastor Thurman?
My prayer for the culture, for me, I think my prayer for the culture will be that for the people who say that they love them, shower them with love. And what I mean by that is, we me I have to put it on myself. I try to make myself more visible and easier to connect with the people who I see need the most help. And because sometimes, and I've experienced this myself growing up, it's very hard to love yourself. And if it's hard for me to love myself, it's hard for me to understand why I should care if you say you love me.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't value it, it doesn't matter to me if you do value it. And so in order for something to be valued, right,
mm-hmm.
there is nothing that you deem valuable that you don't have some kind of protection around it. You got a front door in your house. You got a lock on your car. Anything that you seem is valuable, there's an air of protection, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
The devil knew that Job was valuable to God because he said, "You put a whole hedge around him."
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me I can attack him when I can see you see value in him because I can't get to him. And so what we have to do is we have to begin to make people feel like that we can be a fence to them,
mm-hmm.
that we can embrace them, that we can really be a part of their life in a way that protects them against some of the elements that they're used to suffering from. And so what my prayer is that I find a way to be more visible in the lives of those who don't feel valued.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because it doesn't make any sense, right? Because love is a language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes if love is a language, and let's just say, I'm going to make this very clear. If love is a language and I speak Spanish and you speak Latin, and I come to you and say, I love you in Spanish and you speak Latin, will you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
You won't. So we love people, but our love get lost in translation because they can't interpret what we say is love. And so unless we're speaking their language, so what they determine to be what love is, so they can feel love, then we're not loving them. We're just talking to them with a sentiment.
Brother Gary, can I just say one more thing because I have to go into Sunday school. I wanted to say it's been a wonderful experience listening to everybody on tonight, all the input. I want to say to Pastor Avery, if you consider throwing your hat into the political arena, I will be delighted to be your chairperson. I listen to you and I'm like, wow, this is what we need for our country. So just let me know when you decide to throw it in, and I'll get my people together and you got 100% back in this area, and we'll do what we have to do to get you in the White House. You be blessed, everybody be blessed. I love you all in Jesus' name.
Thank you, too.
Okay, cool. So Ron, you don't have anything to say?
Well, God bless Pastor Avery and everybody that's here, because I know everybody still has a little bit of fight in them, or a lot of fight. I know Pastor Avery does, and because the things that's happening right now, we're going to need some good people to carry the torch. I mean, for the ministers that were in the forefront, carrying the torch. A lot of them, like the sister said, some of them are going on from here to glory or whatever. But it's good that you have this attitude, because I'm hearing so many young people speaking that there's a disconnect, and I think you are going to be that link that's going to help connect us together, so God bless your work, and I'm glad that I got a chance to hear from you.
Okay, cool. Okay. So Pastor Avery, in regards to local government's role, to fix the many problems that we have with social and economic inequality, what is your solution? What would you do to try to fix some of these things that all of our communities across America are going through?
The first thing I would do is our young people, and in Baltimore, we have this thing where you can't graduate from high school unless you have, I think it's 80 hours of volunteer hours. I think it's 80 hours, and maybe a little bit less, right? You cannot get your diploma unless you satisfy that requirement, and you have the 4 years of your high school to satisfy them. And I've always said volunteer hours doesn't mean anything. I would like to see a requirement that says you have to have 12 to 20 hours of therapy before you graduate high school, right? Because it doesn't, if you put, the Bible says this, it says, a fool and his money will soon depart. And that term fool just really means a person ill-equipped mentally for what they've been blessed with. And so even if we bestow blessings on these people, because they're ill-equipped mentally to handle the blessings, it's going to fall to none. So what we have to do is we have to start really addressing the mental health, the problem solving, the being able to get some of the trauma of being third, fourth, fifth generations, no fathers in a home. You're in a house by yourself because your mom got to work 2 jobs. There are some very critical things that kids are dealing with today that they have to figure out solutions on how to deal with because they don't really have a parental individual that they can go to. And if we don't address some of the mental health needs through the years of neglect and just trying to survive, then no matter how many blessings we put on our people, those blessings will fall to the ground because they aren't mentally prepared to take advantage of the opportunities we so desperately need.
Yes, sir.
Oh, and just let me add one little quick thing to that. You had mentioned something about $59,000 as far as getting rental, as far as renting for poor income. I think if you have 59, that's too much. But the point I'm trying to make is, right here in Philadelphia, I'm seeing some sad things about homelessness, about people getting evicted from their houses and apartments because they cannot afford the rent. The rent is getting to the point where it's $2,000, $3,000 a month or $1,500 a month, and people who live on a fixed income can't make it. So I'm seeing a lot of people out in the street. I mean, when I'm driving by, and one incident we had, there was a shooting. A person was being evicted. They were there for some time. I don't know all the details, but I think that particular person was shot because they hired some outside private group to go in and evict these people. But it has become a problem here in Philadelphia. I don't know about other places. There's a lot of people falling through the cracks. And at the rate we're going, with the prices going sky high, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, after a while, it's going to be the straw that broke the camel's back. And, it's a sad situation, but I'm noticing it here in Philadelphia. And I don't know what is going to happen when you have so many people going to the Salvation Army and so many people having tent cities and stuff. This is a reality that's not being spoken about. It's kept quiet, but it exists.
Absolutely. Okay. So, Pastor Thurman, before we go, if you could just basically give information on your church to anyone that may be interested to maybe attend the church or just to find you on social media, how do people reach you all? What's your address? What's the information?
Sure. The church name is Created for So Much More Worship Center. We are located at 701 Cherry Hill Road, and that's in Baltimore, Maryland, 21225. You can reach me personally. I'm on Facebook, Avery Thurman, AveryThurman. I also teach a class every Sunday morning at 8:30 on Facebook Live called Morning Manor. So you can tune in on Sunday mornings for that. You can go to my page and see all the previous ones. And I definitely respond to a message or so. If you leave me through the messenger or through Facebook, I'll respond back to you. The church phone number is 410-355-0040. And you can also call to get details on the things we have going on and the things we are offering to community. And also, if you want, leave a prayer request.
We really do appreciate our guest who participated in this episode, and we hope you learned something that will bless your day and your life. For all who are interested in learning more about the Gary Clement Radio Show podcast, please visit www.amazon.com and order my book, The Gary Clement Radio Show, When Strong Afro-American Men and Women Stand Up. It covers everything about us and features a variety of Afro-American personalities who speak out about the importance of education and literacy in the Black community. Well, we thank you for tuning into our podcast. Please send us your email address so we can contact you when we have new releases and new episodes and new projects as well. You can reach us at gccpresents@yahoo.com. And also, if you're interested in submitting any materials or want to get in touch with us, please do so by simply sending an email to gccpresents@yahoo.com. That's G as in Gary, C as in Charlie, C as in Charlie, presents@yahoo.com. So until next time, do take care. And this is a G2 Network Media production.